Good evening, everyone. My name is Celeste Lacabra. Welcome back to my channel. Today is the third episode of Cinema Sepulcher, the series where I scour my Blu-ray collection and choose 3 unwatched films to discuss in hopes of saving them from rotting on the shelf like a fetid corpse in an unmarked tomb. Okay, so I'm sorry this video is a week late. It almost was 2 weeks late because my internet wasn't working today and it was a whole thing, so thankfully I was able to get it up today. But in any case, we're here to talk about 3 films today. All 3 of them are Indicator limited editions. The first one is entitled SCUM, directed by Clarke. This is a film about a British juvenile detention center. Essentially, we start by following this character on the front as he's transferred from one to another. And we quickly start to see just how horribly authoritarian and violent this institution is, especially for children. I'll give you a quick little tour of the box. I got numbers 7,825 out of 8,000, so by the skin of my teeth, I got this one. If the limited edition isn't sold out by now, the standard edition should still be available, and go ahead and spoil it right now. You absolutely need to buy it. This is one of the best films I've ever seen in my life. It's one of the most harrowing and disturbing films I've ever seen. It's the sort of thing that will ruin your day, but in a good way, I guess, because you've experienced something powerful, but in a bad way, I guess, because it's not like it's just harrowing and disturbing, and it will make you feel really bad and possibly very sad. I will give a content warning for really violent and realistic and unflinching scenes of rape and suicide. That's something that really especially stands out to me, is the way that the film is shot. It's almost shot like it's a documentary, and in one of the interviews on the disc, the cinematographer actually says that that's how he approached shooting it. He didn't really want to make it too Hollywood or too flashy or too cinematic, I guess. He wanted it to feel like you were really there and you were really just a fly on the wall for these boys' horrible, horrible experiences. The performances in this are just so good across the board. It's just the whole thing is so gritty and so violent and so heartbreaking. I think that this is mostly supposed to be read as a straightforward critique of the specific system that it's talking about and that it portrays, but I also think it works as a metaphor for totalitarianism and authoritarianism in general. It's really just a scathing indictment of any system that seeks to destroy a person's individuality and reduce them to simply a worker or a mistake. There's a lot to say here about punitive justice in general. I think it extends well beyond just the specific system and the kind of specific place that is being depicted here. The film also has a lot of really interesting things to say about race and racial tensions and racial dynamics. It has a lot to say about the role that religion and faith has to play in all these systems of abuse. Again, I'm kind of walking this line where I want to talk about it, but I also don't want to spoil it for you because I think it needs to be experienced, and I really want you to go see it because it's just so amazing, and I just don't hear enough people talk about it. Like, I don't know why this wasn't considered like a classic British film. Or, I mean, maybe it is. It's kind of a cult classic, but it's kind of marketed, or I guess remembered as a cult classic and as sort of a genre film, or a sort of kind of like a trashy sort of horror film, maybe. I think that's what a lot of people think of when they see it, at least see the cover or hear of the film. But like, this should be in the Criterion Collection, I think. Maybe one day, because this is a Region B release, but I think it really deserves it. A couple other things that I found really interesting in the special features were the actors that talked about how the differences between the first and this version, because originally this was a TV film and it was so violent and disturbing that it was automatically banned, and so they made it a theatrical film and like really swung for the fences and made it even more disturbing. I haven't seen the original. It's not included in this set, but I would really like to seek that out at some point. So the actors talk about what it was like to just kind of do the same thing again, and the differences between the 2 versions that they did, and the way that they kind of felt worn down by the time they did it, because it's such a grueling shoot that they were subjected to twice. There's really a lot of details in here about just how harsh and brutal the shoot was. They actually hired a lot of non-actors, like a lot of actual juvenile delinquent extras. And apparently there was a lot of like gangs essentially that formed between the actors and the non-actors. And in some of these like larger fight scenes, people really did get hurt. So I don't know, it seemed like a really intense thing to be a part of, but I think the results really paid off. If I haven't said it enough times, find yourself a copy of SCUM. You know what? I just remembered that Kino Lorber actually released the Region A version of this. And there's less extras on it, but if that's more accessible to you, like, please go get it. It's so good. Okay, next, from 1976 and director Phillipe Mora, Mad Dog Morgan. This was another one that I really loved, and I'm surprised is kind of relegated to the grindhouse cult film genre freak circuit as opposed to just being remembered as a legitimately great Australian classic, like a kind of really violent and really effective critique of colonialism, of white supremacy, and of police in general. Essentially, Mad Dog Morgan follows the titular character as he essentially breaks parole after he is like horrifically abused in prison, and he essentially like is on the lam for several years. He befriends an Aboriginal, and they basically go around stealing from rich people, fighting off police, etc. Dennis Hopper gives an incredible lead performance, as does the Aboriginal actor. Yeah, I think Mad Dog Morgan is a really great character. He's a really dynamic, multifaceted, sort of gray in his morality, you know? I think he was certainly thought of as a villain in his time, and he's kind of become a folk hero in retrospect in Australia. And this kind of, I think, maybe meets somewhere in the middle, though I think he's definitely portrayed more sympathetically than some would probably like. The making of documentary on it is pretty good, and the interviews with the director were especially enlightening. My favorite tidbit from it was that, so without spoiling the film, there's a character who plays sort of one of the heads of police. He's bald, to give you a hint if you've seen it. And he is just so utterly ruthless and horrible and amoral that his family descendants actually wrote the director a letter essentially saying, hey, this one particular detail you put in the film about our grandfather was too much. Like, this is, you're besmirching his name, essentially. And it's like, you didn't have to go this far to make your point. And the director essentially said, look, I got this from the historical record word for word. I did not make this up. I can't help it if your grandfather was a complete piece of shit. So yeah, I'm recommending a lot of really gritty, kind of intense films today, but this one is a little bit more fun. It's not just so bleak and harrowing that it will ruin your day. There's a lot of kind of adventure and crime film elements to it, but it's based on a real person and based on real events, and it has meaningful things to say at the end of the day. So I highly recommend that one. So finally, from 1968, starring the one and only Peter Cushing, we have Corruption. This is a sort of really bizarre late 60s horror film. It was marketed to me on Indicator's website as the British answer to Eyes Without a Face, and at the time, Eyes Without a Face was my all-time favorite film. It's still up there, but it's not. It doesn't quite hold that place for me anymore. But in any case, as soon as I read that, I was like, I'm sold. I need to have this. And I think I actually pre-ordered it. I was so excited, and I finally got around to watching it. After seeing it, it is definitely almost a soft remake of Eyes Without a Face. Like, the idea is so completely similar. But especially with the inclusion of Peter Cushing as the Doctor, and you know, kind of with some of the elements that it incorporates, it's sort of like Hammer's Frankenstein meets Eyes Without a Face. And if you're like me and you love both of those things, and you love Peter Cushing and you love bizarre 60s horror films, I would definitely recommend this. So the marketing campaign for this, I think, was really horrible. And I think Peter Cushing kind of doesn't like the way that it turned out, because he thought he signed up for something a little bit more classy. But you can find an image of it. But the theatrical poster essentially says, like, this is not a women's picture. No women will be admitted to the theater alone. It's fucking annoying, you know, but it's not even that intense, honestly. I mean, I guess for 1968, this was pretty hardcore stuff, but I mean, that marketing campaign is just so infantilizing and misogynistic, but I don't think you need me to point that out. So essentially, Peter Cushing is dating or is engaged to a model, and he is pretty much responsible for, like, marring her face in one of the opening scenes. And then since he's, like, this really incredible doctor, he kind of devises a plan to surgically, again, I'm trying not to give too much away, but he essentially perfects a surgery where he is able to get her pituitary gland to regenerate the skin on her face such that it's perfect and just like it was before. Now, unfortunately, as you might guess, he has to get the raw human material from somewhere. And so he ends up being a really kind of monstrous character throughout. What's interesting to me about him is the moral ambiguity of his character. You know, in Eyes Without a Face, the doctor is also morally ambiguous, but what's interesting to me and what's different from that film is that in that film, the person who's being surgically altered is not technically consenting to it. Like, she's a child, and she's not really given an option as to if she wants these horrible things done for her own, essentially, vanity. But in this one, we're talking about somebody who has full agency and who is actually kind of flipping the power dynamic of Eyes Without a Face and engaging in most of the manipulation. So again, I don't want to spoil too much about it. There's a couple kind of interesting interviews on this, but most of the supplements are in really shitty quality, like feature film length audio interviews that are presented as like audio tracks on top of the film. That's interesting to me because when I was going through the Mae West box that Indicator put out, I watched one of their audio interviews, the Mae West ones, and it was just kind of a still image, like explaining what you were watching and then just the audio of the event. This one has one or two audio commentaries on top of it that you can actually select, but without asking you, it kind of, when you play these interviews, it just starts the film. And I guess they were both about the same runtime as this film, so they were just like, sure, throw it on there. But the audio quality is terrible, so I honestly didn't really watch those. But the interviews were quite good and enjoyable, so overall, I do really recommend the release, and I really recommend the film. Okay, so that wraps up Cinema Sepulcher, Episode 3. Let's talk about what I'm going to watch next week. So next week, I wanted to dive into my Vinegar Syndrome partner label releases. I've actually watched everything in my actual Vinegar Syndrome collection, but I still have a decent amount of partner releases that I just kind of blind bought on a whim and haven't gotten around to yet. So first, now the Spanish title of this is Colejas, but it translates to Pals. This is an Altered Innocence title with incredible artwork from Sister Hyde. Next from Doppelganger Films is Heavy Trip, and from Fun City Editions, a film by Lynn Ramsey, Morvern Caller. I don't know how to pronounce that, to be honest with you, and hopefully the film will teach me how. So, that's that. Thank you so much for watching the video. Please like the video, leave me lovely comments to read, and subscribe to the channel to be a part of this community. There is links in the description if you want to follow me on Letterboxd, Instagram, and Write Your Music. That's all for me today. I love and appreciate you all, and I hope that your day ends better than it started.